The Scream Kings are in no way responsible for any encounters with the paranormal, extraterrestrial abductions, eldritch insanity, hauntings, curses, hexes, demonic possessions, cryptozoological sightings, or any loss of sleep that may result from listening to this podcast.
So what's your opinion of Ouija boards?
Me personally, I don't mess around with it.
I don't see any evil spirits under there. No.
I've never seen one, and I've had a bunch of these around for a long time. I've never had a Ouija board do anything Ouija.
There have been cases known of people playing with a Ouija board just in quote-unquote innocence, it's not innocent, and becoming possessed because they put themselves in that line of danger.
Conjuring up demons on an Ouija board is something that we would never suggest.
A kindergarten teacher at Zablocki Elementary is removed from her class today for using a Ouija board in front of her students last week.
This is the Scream Kings podcast. I'm Nathaniel Darkish.
And I'm Max George.
As a podcast, we gather. Hearts are true. Spirits near. We call to you.
Ooh, I think that's the most ominous podcast intro we've ever had. Spooky, spooky. I'm so excited for this episode, Nathaniel.
As am I, Max. This is a very cool episode. I feel like this is kind of what we're going for with our format, but we don't always put in that much work, which is on us. But hey, it's going to pay off this episode.
Hey, now, sometimes there's just not a lot of content out there, honestly. Well, I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, no, I think it's honestly on us when we don't have episodes that are this awesome. But regardless.
Yeah, sorry everybody, but put your big boy pants on, because we're gonna get satanic tonight.
Or your big girl pants. I mean, we're equal opportunity. Pants.
Just as long as you're down with having
pants.
some fun with Lucifer.
No. Heck with Lucifer. We're talking about Zozo.
Ouija boards! I'm so excited, Nathaniel.
Let's just start off by talking about Ouija boards.
And I think it's important to note that we're going to kind of flip things on its head today. We want to kind of go into the occult corner that I will be hosting tonight. You're going to be assisting me with some lovely facts that you've learned about these demonic spirit boards.
Yes.
And then we'll talk about some movies, primarily Ouija, and then also Ouija, the Origin of Evil, which we'll get there.
Yep.
We'll get there.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those downward trajectories for the podcast, but I think it will work best that way.
Right, we'll start at the top layer of hell and slowly descend into Satan's navel.
Yes, his very hairy navel.
Ugh, I don't want to think about Satan's navel.
Spelling something. This is too weird. Go ahead. Ask another.
All right. Ouija boards. What's their deal? You know, you say Ouija board in public, and we did a little experiment that hopefully you guys heard at the beginning of the episode. I personally reached out to friends and family and asked, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word Ouija board? And Nathaniel, what would you say yours is?
Well, so I guess my own personal reaction to Ouija boards is that, I mean, it's a game. I think that anything, regardless of if it's, a set pattern of occult activity like the Ouija board, or really anything could be an invitation for evil in your life. But I don't know. I think for the most part, most people just play it as a game, and that's all it is. And some people have really bad experiences with it, and that is, I don't know, it's valid, I guess, but I don't know. I don't really know how I feel is what I'm really getting at, because it's so multifaceted, as we're about to talk about.
So here are some of my favorite responses from what people told me when I asked that same question. Devils and demons and ghosts. Creepy AF. Another one, hell no. Someone else said, that's a terrible movie. My favorite one is probably dumb teenage girls trying to be edgy at sleepover parties. Another one was evil, devil, sketchy AF. There's AF again. Clearly, this indicates the caliber of my friends.
Yeah. You should text different people.
And darkness. So generally not very positive, gut reactions to Ouija boards.
Yeah.
You go into the mass public and you talk about these Ouija boards and they get, I don't know what it is about them, and hopefully we can kind of pick it apart this afternoon in our podcast. But the Ouija, I'm kind of getting over a cold and my drugs are kicking in and out.
Yeah. You'll notice both of our voices are kind of wonky, and that's because illness is the worst thing.
Anyway, so tonight as we pick apart these Ouija boards, I really want to dissect our fear about them, because as we learn about the history, it's really intriguing that these Ouija boards were not created with the occult in mind. So kind of where I wanted to start my occult corner was talking about kind of the first real event about spirit boards or talking boards, whatever you want to call them. One of the first mentions of, quote, automatic writing, unquote, which is essentially what you're doing a Ouija board. You put your fingers on the planchette, and that planchette moves over the letters, moves over yes or no. It's a form of automatic writing, which is pretty prevalent in the supernatural community.
And I guess you just want to explain maybe what automatic writing is a little bit more before we go into spirit boards specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So automatic writing, like I mentioned, is something that you find in a lot of supernatural parapsychology kind of areas. Essentially, a watered down explanation of it is there's a conduit, so a human, and they allow a spirit to kind of take them over. Not like possession. It's a little bit more benign.
It's more like a ghost is guiding your hand kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the spirit, the ghost, whatever you want to call it, moves your hand, and you'll either write out words that you were not intending to write out, or you'll draw an image that you were not intending to draw. Essentially, it's a way of divination. It's a way to connect with spirits and kind of hear what they're saying. And so that correlates to Ouija boards and spirit boards in that we're opening ourselves up to the spirit and letting them guide our hands across this board to kind of give us answers to questions and stuff like that. Is that resonating at all?
Yep.
All right. So one of the first mentions of that was actually in China around 1100 AD. And the method was known as Fuji, which F-U-J-I, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I apologize.
Probably Fuji.
And what that translates into English is actually planchette writing, which is pretty interesting. And the ancient Chinese used this as a means of necromancy and communing with the spirit world. So I thought that was kind of interesting that, this automatic writing system is connected with spirituality and kind of the quote unquote occult.
Necromancy.
Yeah. And then similar methods of this like mediumistic spirit writing. You can see it in almost all cultures: medieval Europe, Greece, Rome, even India. So it's been around for quite a bit. But how do we get the Ouija board, and essentially how did it formulate into a concrete item that is universally known nowadays? And the last episode, we talked a lot about the Fox sisters. And for those who need a recap, it was this set of three sisters who really kicked off the spiritual movement in the 19th century here in America.
We actually didn't talk about it. We were going to, and then we didn't.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
So you better dig into it.
Holy moly, Nathaniel. Holy moly, this episode's going to be like 7 hours long. I apologize to everybody.
But 7 hours of awesome content.
All right, so let me back up. Here in America, the spiritualistic movement really got kicked off in the 19th century. A big proponent of the movement getting propelled was this group of 3 sisters. Their names were Kate, Margaret, and Lucy, I believe. I can double check that real fast. But Kate and Margaret were kind of the 2 main players.
And they were total foxes.
When they were little, they really liked to play pranks, and they lived in this kind of house that had this reputation of being haunted, and they'd actually take an apple and tie it to a string and then drop it on the wooden floor above like the living room or their parents' bedroom, and it created this illusion that the house was haunted. And they kind of monopolized on that. They developed this method of popping their joints and like clacking their knees together to make a series of what they called rappings. And then they would hold these giant seances for the community where they would bring people in who had questions about, people who had departed, stuff like that. And then they would use these kind of charlatan methods to deceive the people into thinking that the spirits were talking to them. And it caught on like wildfire. It was insane. America had just kind of gotten out of enlightened period with religion. There was a lot of transitions going on, and there was a lot of kind of occult magic behind the scenes that not a lot of people like to talk about because occult and religion don't really mesh very well.
Unless you're a Wiccan.
Unless you're a Wiccan. Or you're Max.
That's fair.
So the Fox sisters really started to make quite a bit of good money on this. To kind of wrap up the story quicker so we can get into Ouija boards, eventually they kind of ran out of money, essentially. They launched a bunch of other mediums, and so they started having competition. And eventually one of the sisters actually converted to Catholicism and came out and said that it was all a sham, and went on public record and kind of went over all of these different methods that they incorporated into their seances to try and prove to people that spirits were real. So it was a real blow for the spiritualistic movement because essentially the founders, these awesome women who led the movement, were all charlatans.
But that did not put a stop to that movement.
No, not at all. So those Fox sisters, like I mentioned, really kicked everything off. And primarily there were some spirit camps, is what they call them, in Ohio. In 1890, it was just kind of like almost this carnival type of feel, where you could go and see mediums, you could get your palms read, tarot cards read, you could do these seances. And there was a guy named Elijah Bond, and he was actually the first guy to take a board, plaster the alphabet on it, put a yes, put a no, and inscribe goodbye on it. Use a planchette, which is essentially a triangle with a lens in the center. And he essentially created the modern day Ouija board. He got the patent in 1890, and I've actually read the original patent, and it's pretty interesting because there's nothing in the patent that explicitly describes that this board that he created had purpose for spiritualism or for divination or anything. When he created it, it was entirely a monetary creation, which I think is just fantastic.
Yeah, and in some of the research I was doing, I saw that this isn't his only patent. I mean, he had a fair number of other inventions that were not at all related to the spiritualist movement in any concept. And yeah, I guess he was professionally just a lawyer who had an idea and figured he would make some money.
Yeah, and so a few years later, we had a guy named William Fould. I'm not quite sure how to say his name. It's Fuld. He actually took over production of these boards, and he's the one who specifically termed them to be Ouija boards. The Charles Kennard It was a big gaming company at the time, if I'm not mistaken. They're the ones who actually took the patent and then started to mass produce it and manufacture it so it could be used more prolifically. And when Fuld kind of was in collaboration with him, or with them, with the Charles Kennard company, he told them that he was using the board and Ouija was actually good luck in Egyptian, which is kind of poetic for, what you use Ouija boards for. But later, as the years went by, Fuld actually described that he got the word Ouija from two words in French and German and then mushed them together. The word was yes, so you've got oui and you've got ja. So technically it should be Ouija. So, people have made fun of me for saying Ouija and neener. Do your research, people.
So what it really means is yes.
Yes. It's a yes board. And that is how I will be referring to it from now on.
It's the opposite of like a no-no can for a dog.
So that's kind of the ground base of how the Ouija board got created. It was an entirely monetary production. A lot of the creators kind of got pulled into the mythos of it, and I honestly think that was because they wanted to produce their sales. America was going through this booming spiritualistic movement. Everyone wanted a Ouija board. Why wouldn't you kind of ride the wave with everyone else so you could bump your sales up?
Yeah, I in some of the trivia I was looking up, I saw that William Fuld, he was either actually a big believer in the Ouija board, or at least he, would regularly talk about, oh yes, I made this decision because I was conferring with the spirits via the board. And ironically, serendipitously, he allegedly was building a warehouse because of instructions he received from the board, and he fell off of the roof at that warehouse and died. So, allegedly, Ouija boards led to his death.
Of course, that's the only reason that makes sense.
So, maybe not so good of luck?
Ouija boards to me are a lot like the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon, like we mentioned in episode 3, was created by Lovecraft as a method of entertainment. He did not intend, I honestly believe, to make this demonology book that, occultists and Satanists and demon worshippers would come to almost revere in a Bible-like sense. To me, that's a lot of what Ouija boards have turned into. Fuld and Elijah Bond, while they were caught up in the spiritualistic movement and they were kind of advertising these games as a method to connect, at the end of the day, you can see it in the patent that they were just trying to make a buck. And society took the Ouija board and we turned it into something that it's not. And I mean, it's really fascinating to me that actual hard science has done a ton of research into like Ouija boards, dowsing rods, kind of all of these methods used for divination. And almost ubiquitously, all of these research studies have shown that the reason why these things work is because of what's called the idiosyncratic method. Have you heard that term before, Nathaniel?
I've heard it, but let's go over it in a little detail.
Yeah. So the idiosyncratic method kind of refers to, we all have the subconscious and we all have these kind of deeper level thoughts that are continually going. And so when we're presented with something such as a Ouija board, where we're assuming and expecting something to happen, we have these neural connections from our brain to our muscles that kind of almost force the situation to happen. We're looking at the board. We want the planchette to move to yes. We're telling ourselves that we're just going to let whatever happens, happens. But again, these subconscious thoughts actually make our muscles move to yes. And the research is extremely prolific. It's not something that, like vaccines, who believes in vaccines? It's very, very well documented that this idiosyncratic method is how Ouija boards work. And it's kind of the reason why if you close your eyes, it's not going to work. You have to be focusing on the board, visualizing what you want, and really being in the moment. It's pretty fascinating. It brings me to the point, one of my main questions that I wanted to focus on during this episode was, why doesn't it work for everybody? If everyone is so terrified about Ouija boards and what they can do, and you're going to introduce demons and spirits into your life, why does that not happen to everyone? Why have I used the Ouija board twice and feel totally fine?
Maybe it's because, as we've established, that's just a Tuesday for you.
Maybe the demons see that I'm using a Ouija board and they're just like, Max is at it again.
How cliche.
There's no novelty in me talking to demons anymore. It's fine.
Yeah. If they really want to mess with you, they don't talk to you via a Ouija board. They just mess with your Wi-Fi again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Pazuzu. I'm still not over that, you jerk. You dirty bastard. Get out of my Wi-Fi router. Anyway, we digress.
Maybe you shouldn't be shouting at Pazuzu again, considering that he might come up again in this episode.
Oh, it's fine. I used the Ouija board last night. He's leaving me alone today.
Ah, okay.
I really want to hit the nail on the head as well, that really the pivot point for a lot of people and Ouija boards was one of our favorite horror movies, The Exorcist. In 1973, it's amid a very turbulent time in the United States because Anton LaVey, essentially the man who created Satanism, was really getting the role, or really getting kind of the ball rolling, excuse me. There was a huge kind of Satanistic scare in the country. People were playing their records backwards, and, the Beatles were evil, and everything that wasn't strictly religious had some sort of satanic connotation with it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Manson did murder a bunch of people.
Well, that's Charles Manson. That's not Anton LaVey.
I know, but I mean, he basically.
Totally.
Like basically, people took Manson and LaVey and Aleister Crowley and everything like that. It's like, oh, yeah, it's all the same. Which, I mean, there's definitely some similarities in ideology, maybe, but not necessarily.
I don't know. I will fight you to the death between Charles Manson and Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley's my boo.
Well, I guess maybe. Do you want to talk a little bit about how Aleister Crowley felt about Ouija boards? Because I know that he was a big proponent of them and actually tried to sell some himself.
Yeah, you kind of just hit it right there. He thought they were fantastic. He had several of his closest companions use them regularly, and they wanted to try and actually fine-tune them. And Aleister Crowley was all about putting his own mark on the occult. You get Thelema, which was his kind of offshoot of the occult, which has all of his different revelations and writings. He created his own tarot card set, they're beautiful. It's called the Thoth tarot card, and Thoth is the Egyptian god of wisdom and magic. And it got to the point too where he wanted to make his own Ouija board, so he was huge into them. And kind of backtracking a little bit, I think it's an excellent point that you brought up with Charles Manson, actually. The whole Helter Skelter thing. You have Heaven's Gate. There was a lot of cult activity in the late 60s and the 70s. Added this new religion of Satanism, add Aleister Crowley. I mean, it was just kind of the perfect hotbed for Ouija boards to get taken on a completely different level. And a lot of religions started coming out and saying anything that has anything to do with soothsaying or divination is of the devil, and what happened in The Exorcist is going to happen to you. And it just kind of exploded. And a lot of people that are around nowadays came from that generation where Ouija boards were devil items that if you played with them, you were risking your soul and your salvation because you're basically opening the door for a demon. So, Nathaniel, I know that you are still very religious.
Yes.
What are your thoughts and beliefs about Ouija boards? I know you kind of talked about your first impressions when you hear the term, but as far as you're kind of the more religious side of this podcast.
Oh, definitely.
Do you want to go into kind of where things are nowadays?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think things have changed a whole bunch. Kind of the Christian religious world, at least, generally speaking, is still pretty opposed to Ouija boards. Kind of depends on who you talk to. You know, I've talked to people who, you know, are very religious, but, you know, just are like, yeah, it's just a kid's game, like, whatever. I mean, it's made by Hasbro, so, like, it's no different than playing Monopoly or Clue. Yeah, what it boils down to is a belief in evil spirits being in the world and being something that you can interact with. Kind of opening yourself up to communicating with something demonic. I think that evil is in the world, so yeah, there are ways to interact with it, unfortunately.
So I kind of want to challenge that thought with you.
Okay.
You know, where you know now the history of the Ouija boards. And I kind of want to talk about this a little bit more as we finish the podcast, because I've got a lot of feelings about it. But what makes it opening up yourself, you know, to negative forces or evil spirits, you know, whatever you do believe, what is it about a board with letters and a planchette? What about that process opens you up? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's designed for you to ask the spirits. And so, I mean, specifically going into it with a belief that you are actually going to receive a response from a spirit, I think is kind of where that boils down to opening yourself up to that, because you're specifically requesting information from beyond.
So would you compare it to kind of a darker version of prayer, maybe?
Yeah. That's not a bad comparison. I mean, as I said, I kind of hold some reservations about how much, you know, use of a Ouija board or something like that would actually necessarily invite evil into one's life. I mean, for the most part, I think people play it as a game, and it's that simple. I think really, you know, if you were to use a Ouija board genuinely wanting to communicate with a ghost or with a demon or something like that, there is enough out there that you could get a response. I don't think necessarily everyone does. I mean, a lot of that really does kind of go back to the idiosyncratic method of a lot of this is just whatever is in your subconscious. A lot of it will just be whatever you're expecting to see or hear, I guess, read in response, or, you know, I mean, you're supposed to do it in a group, so it could be, you know, whatever others in the group want to or expect to get as a response subconsciously. But sometimes it might be more than that.
So you kind of have like one foot in both pools, essentially. Is yes, you understand the idiosyncratic method, and yes, you know the history, and this is kind of a trivial object that society has put a stigma on, but also at the same time, you don't want to completely shut out the possibility that it may have some sort of ulterior design.
Yeah, and I think really what that boils down to is things have power because we give it power.
Agreed.
Just because something
Totally.
was, you know, made with the intent to just make money doesn't mean that it can't have other power to it. Yeah, like going back to the Necronomicon, there are people who find great, I guess, religious or you know, great. They genuinely look at it as an object of power, and you know that the things contained in it will actually like allow them to summon demons or worship demons or things like that. And it has power because they believe it does. And that might not be quantifiable to someone else, but you know, but it has meaning in their life. And so I think that's kind of what it can really boil down to, is that, you know, you can have bad come to you, be that bad energy or an evil spirit or just, or even good out of it. I mean, that kind of comes up in the second Ouija movie a little bit. That even going to a charlatan soothsayer, if you end up like feeling positive about your relationship with someone who's deceased as the result of that, like, I don't know, that has power because you believe it.
So I guess my final question for you is, should there be such a negative connotation with Ouija boards?
I think that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that if you expect bad from it, then bad will probably come from it. If nothing else, you might just feel bad as the result of doing it. But I think if you're doing it just to have fun, I don't think bad's going to come your way. So, I mean, I'd say the stigma creates a lot of negativity just because the stigma is so negative.
Do you have any questions you want to ask me?
Well, so I know that you had some rules to play it, and
I have actually played it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about your experiences and what you actually do. We've talked about it more esoterically. Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
So I purchased a Ouija board off of Amazon.com. And it came in a box that looks like all my other board games. So, pretty evil stuff. When I first got it, there was kind of this, like, visceral, like, oh my gosh, I've got a Ouija board. I have, like, 8 or 9 books on demons and how to summon them, but, ooh, this is scarier. Like, it was this weird fear about it. And I took it to... First time I ever used it, I took it to one of the most haunted hotels supposedly in the Utah area, which was what is formerly the Ben Lomond Hotel. And if you're listening outside the state of Utah, definitely look up Ben Lomond Hotel. There's a lot of fun kind of horror facts about that specific building. A lot of creepy things happen there. And me and my now boyfriend were actually using it. It was around Valentine's, which is kind of
hot
fun.
Date.
I know. I knew he liked me when he played with a Ouija board for Valentine's Day.
I'm not going to make an innuendo about a planchette.
Okay, good. And we sat down, nestled into it, and again, it's like this weird, like...
Is that an innuendo?
Oh my god, I'm going to kick you in the face. Sat down to play with the Ouija board. And did the whole put your fingers on it and try and get into the mood and blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
get into the mood in more ways than one. Okay, you're really ruining my Ouija board story. Do you want to hear it or not?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And the planchette actually starts moving. And in my mind, I'm like, what the good hell? This is actually working? I haven't believed in any of this shit. And it starts to move. And the first letter it goes to is I. The second letter it goes to is L. I'm like, okay, I've got to like keep track of this mentally in my head. What is it spelling? L-I-K-E. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. And then the next word that was spelled out was M-A-X. So yeah, the only time a Ouija board has really worked for me was to let the spirits, also formerly known as my boyfriend, let me know that he liked me. So that was good. And then the last time I used it was actually just last night. I wanted to kind of bust it out again and play around with it for the podcast specifically. And I even like lit some spiritual incense. I got a candle, kind of turned all the lights off in my house and set the mood, and nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Oh man, and we even had such good questions for it.
Well, there was one answer to, what horror movie best depicts the underworld, but the board spelled out Pirates of the Caribbean. So I don't know if that's entirely accurate or not.
So apparently, ghost pirates and treasure is what it's all about.
Exactly.
Hey, we talked about Pirates of the Caribbean on the podcast. Are you happy, Max's dad?
Not my dad, my boss.
Oh, that's who it was. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell him tomorrow. He'll be very, very excited. All right, before we move in to talking about the Zozo movies and Zozo and kind of the overall sentiment of this podcast episode, I did want to give everyone 21 rules that they need to know before they start playing. This was written by Aaron Cosetta. Whoever you are, Aaron Cosetta, thank you for being such an expert on Ouija boards that you can list out 21 rules. I don't know, I feel like that's a great feat. Way to go, Aaron.
Yeah, the movie only had 3.
That's right. I'm all about the rule book and instruction manuals. If I had 21 rules, I would be reading that, which is why I found this website. All right, rule number 1. Ouija boards are no joke. Read up on what can happen when you use a Ouija board before you use it. So, setting out with a good ominous tone. The most important rule, even though it's rule number 2 and not rule number 1, come on, Aaron Cosetta, is to never taunt or go to spirit to communicate with you through the Ouija board. That can have disastrous consequences. Rule 3, never ask a Ouija board when you are going to die. Rule number 4, spirits who talk to you through your Ouija board can tell you anything they want. Just because a spirit says something does not mean it's true. Number 5, never use a Ouija board alone. I broke this rule last night, so oops. Rule number 6, do not use a Ouija board in your own home. Also broke this rule. But where else are you going to use a Ouija board? Are you going to take it to someone else's home and use it in their home? It seems like a pretty crappy rule.
Yeah, it's always at someone's home.
7 is one person in the group should always be the leader.
So the person who's actually moving the planchette.
There you go. Rule number 8 is if you are not the leader, you must remain silent. Rule number 9, the leader should not ask joke questions with 3 exclamation marks. Oh, these rules are really great. Rule number 10, one person should be assigned the task of keeping track of the answers. I feel like that's actually the best rule in this entire list.
So they keep taking their fingers off the planchette and scribbling down stuff, or
I don't know, or record or something.
Oh, okay.
Rule number 11, don't leave the planchette on the board. And this is actually a rule that comes in the box. For some reason, there's this weird, if the planchette and the board remain intact and you don't separate them, then the gates of hell will open up. I don't know. It seems a little ridiculous. 12, if you want to take a break, have one person keep their hand on the planchette to stay connected to the energy you've built. Rule number 13, always end your session by saying goodbye. This is actually also in the actual board game and is pretty much the only rule that you see consistently through all Ouija board rules, is always say goodbye. The location you use should be dark and free of background noise. You can use a candle to light the board enough to see what the planchette might be spelling. Ugh.
Wait, so why does background noise matter? I mean, it's you're getting responses on a board.
It's because it's like if you've ever tried to talk to someone while they have their music on and you end up just screaming at them.
But they're writing all their responses.
I don't know. I don't make the rules.
Maybe all
Aaron
ghosts...
Cosetta makes the rules.
Maybe the ghosts are all hard of hearing.
Rule number 15. If a spirit starts communicating with you through the board by counting down or going through the alphabet, immediately end your session by saying goodbye. This has connotations to Zozo, which we'll talk about later. If a spirit starts communicating with you by making the planchette make a figure 8 or infinity symbol, immediately say goodbye.
Zozo.
If you begin to suspect that you are in contact with a malevolent spirit, immediately say goodbye. Oh, here we are. If you speak to a spirit who identifies themselves as Zozo, end the session and say goodbye. Zozo has been identified as a malevolent spirit of the Ouija board. Don't use a Ouija board in a cemetery. It just sounds like a bad idea, people.
Yep.
If you are experiencing depression, it may be good to avoid using a Ouija board. depression energy draws in malevolent spirits. Well, I'm screwed then, because I've gone through my share of depression. And then the last one is never burn a Ouija board. This can do more damage than simply leaving it untouched in a closet. This sounds like it's going to cause a lot of headache for people down the road, and is essentially what happened to Reagan. Her mom should have burned the board.
Maybe that's just a practical thing, like, hey, just like throw it in the trash because, you don't want to accidentally like burn something down.
Let's flip over to your kind of fun facts you found about Ouija boards. Hit us up.
Oh man, there are so many great things about Ouija boards. So, I mean, we've already talked about how there's a long history of opposition to Ouija boards. I mean, there's been many like religious groups that have openly made statements against them, and even as recently as in 2001, there was a mass burning of them in New Mexico, alongside copies of Harry Potter, because, evil, apparently.
That's the truer tragedy in that situation.
I mean, J.K. Rowling still got money for all them copies, so whatever.
I don't care. No one burns a Harry Potter book and gets away with it unscathed by Max.
So now you have sworn vengeance on this random group of people in New Mexico?
That's right. Whipping out a demon book tonight, and I'll be sacrificing a chicken. Joke's on you, group in New Mexico who burned Harry Potter books.
And Ouija boards.
And Ouija boards.
So, on the literary side of things, is that a woman named Emily Grant Hutchings wrote a novel using the Ouija board called Jap Heron, and indicated, and claimed very broadly, that the person who really wrote it through the board was the ghost of Mark Twain. That was in 1917. For those of you music fans, Alice Cooper, and I just learned today by finding this fact that is his stage name. Apparently, that early press releases for the band Alice Cooper, basically they said that the name came through use of a Ouija board, and that it was that Vincent Furnier, Alice Cooper, it was a reincarnation of a 17th century witch with that name. And later on, he just said that it was a cool name that he thought of, but whatever. Yeah, early press releases insisted that they used a Ouija board for that. In 1994, in London, a convicted murderer named Stephen Young was granted a retrial after it was learned that 4 of the jurors had conducted a Ouija board seance. Used that Ouija board to contact the murdered person. Yeah, Young was named as the killer. He ended up getting convicted again during his retrial and was jailed for life. But hey, so I guess maybe in this case, Ouija board justice happened, and then real justice followed.
How about We Justice? Oh,
that sounds like the best terrible B movie I've ever heard of.
Oh, we need to use that hashtag more.
Yes. As we've referenced before, it appears in a lot of things, so I'm just going to name some of its more prevalent appearances. So it appears in Stephen King's The Stand. It appears in The Exorcist, as we referenced. It appears in Paranormal Activity, What Lies Beneath. Lots and lots of stuff use Ouija boards. It even appears in the popular board game, and by popular I mean popular among board game nerds, Betrayal at House on the Hill, where it's not a Ouija board, but it's a spirit board. It's one of the items that you can use
Woohoo!
as an omen in the game, which is... that game's awesome. Everyone should play it. Its first movie appearance, and this was a homemade board, not an official Ouija board, was in the film The Uninvited from 1944. But the first movie to have an entire plot built around Ouija boards is the film from 1986, Witchboard, which was, I think, the first in a trilogy. Some facts about the game itself. It is for ages 8 and up, as it's listed on the board. It typically costs about $20, and there are even branded versions available. I know that every time I go to Target to the board game section, I see the Stranger Things Ouija board. So yeah, you can get all sorts of Ouija boards. Finally, we asked on Twitter for questions about Ouija boards, and Taylor, who has been on a previous episode of the podcast when we talked about A Quiet Place, and is also the voice of artist disclaimer, asked the question, how in the world did Hasbro get the rights to the game? So I have the answer to that. So after the game was in William Fauld's hands, I guess after his death, his estate held on to the Ouija board business. So in 1966, they sold it to Parker Brothers, and then in 1981, Parker Brothers sold it to Hasbro. Basically, it was just a popular game, and it was making money. So why not continue to basically pay for the rights to it and make some money? And I know that like around the time of the movies coming out, especially the first film, the sales spiked again, and it became more lucrative than it had in a long time.
Yeah, which again kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, is like, it's just a board game. It's crazy.
But Aleister Crowley would have disagreed with you. But let's drop all of this and talk about the really important thing, Zozo.
Here are some signs you may be in contact with Zozo.
Ah, jeez.
Below, now our podcast is haunted, by the way.
I don't want to be in contact with Zozo, damn it.
Hang up, Zozo.
Hang up, Zozo, get out of here.
Oh man, there's so much to talk about Ouija boards. If you go online and do a search of Zozo, you're going to get a bajillion and a half Google searches about this demon. And if you do deeper research, you'll find out that Zozo is very similar to, say, the Slender Man series. That one person kind of had this experience with this Ouija board where the planchette started going back and forth on the letter Z and the letter O. And it was the name of this kind of the demon of the Ouija board, kind of the almighty demon who controls all the Ouija boards in the world. And it's a bad guy. A lot of the stories that you read about Zozo, there's possession involved, lives fall apart. It's really, really intense as to kind of the darkness that he brings with the Ouija board. And when we were going through those 21 rules, a lot of those later ones were related to Zozo. So if the Ouija board starts counting down, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, that's Zozo is approaching and you need to say goodbye as soon as possible. Same with the alphabet.
Or if it's doing the figure eights or
pentagrams, or really if the Ouija board is doing anything crazy, it's probably Zozo's fault. The research that I went into it, though, was there are a lot of correlations between Zozo and the fun-loving demon who likes to eat my internet, Pazuzu. And it's really fascinating that Pazuzu is predominantly shown in the Exorcist movies, and now that demon from that literature and that kind of cinematic masterpiece, really, has now become a real and living thing. Like, again, things only have as much power as we give them, and you take the Exorcist movies and essentially watermark it on actual Ouija boards, and now you have this all-powerful demon. Like, oh, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if you type Zozo into like YouTube, you're gonna see like 8,000 YouTubers claiming that they used a Ouija board and Zozo tried to possess them, and holy crap, demon in their house.
Right. Essentially, it's like I said, the Satan had an audition or interviews for who wants to be the project manager of all Ouija boards out there, and Pazuzu/Zozo got the job.
I think Zozo is basically just like the hip millennial version of Pazuzu, like. Or like the millennial targeted one. So, he's wearing sunglasses. He's a cool guy. He sits in a beanbag chair. Does lots of BuzzFeed quizzes.
He just got promoted in hell. He's now managing all spirit boards, and this Generation X doesn't get it like the millennials get it. Oh, man. It's crazy what people come up with. It's really fascinating how we take one item from pop culture and plaster it on another item and then believe in it to an insane insane level. It's fascinating to me. Sociology is incredible. Should we talk about the movies?
Yeah, I think honestly maybe the reason why we've been talking about Ouija boards so much and not the movies is because we didn't really want to talk about the movies that much.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
It's like, oh, what else can I squeeze out of this?
Ouija, Origin of Evil is a fairly substantial movie.
You ever feel like even after someone you love has died, there's still a way you can talk to them?
You want to talk to Debbie.
The first Ouija movie is garbage.
I don't know. Do you really want to say it's garbage? That might insult garbage.
Oh, there's a Spanish term that we used when I was in Uruguay called porqueria, which is not garbage, but it's like a step below garbage and a step above poop. So I'm going to go with that.
I don't know. That might be an insult to porqueria.
All right, let's get the first one over with real quick.
Okay.
Is there anything of note to talk about the first one?
There's some fun set pieces.
Yeah, there are. Agreed.
So, I mean, and it's all stuff that you see in the trailer. Basically, like, if you watch the trailer, like, hey, like, that was a few creepy little things. Like, I don't know, the sewing of the mouth shut and stuff. I don't know, that looks kind of creepy.
Because, voodoo is the exact same thing as Ouija boards.
Yeah. So, I guess, should we just, like, very briefly touch on like, the plot and cringe while we're touching on the plot?
Yeah, I'm gonna make you do it though.
Okay, so watered down version. Girl uses Ouija board. She kills herself. Her friends start using the Ouija board to try to figure out what happened. They start dropping like flies, and you keep seeing stuff with like mouths being sewn shut. They start doing some like digging into like the history of the house and all that stuff, and find out that a lady back in the 70s had some problems, which is the plot of Ouija Origin of Evil, which we'll get more into it later. And so they like talk to her in an insane asylum, and you find out like her sister had some things, and I don't know, it's dumb. Things fall apart. So most of them die.
The plot doesn't make sense from like the very beginning. It's just like all over the place. It's like it took cocaine and is just ping-ponging all over the place. It's bad. It's bad.
It's one of those horror movies that you can tell they knew it would sell because Ouija is like a known quantity. And so they decided to make a Ouija movie, and they put as little money into it as possible. And they got, like, they just had the sloppiest writing. Like, they have a few okay effects, but not anything to write home about. And they hired like 2 like decent actors in it, and like a bunch of like no-name people who really can't act at all. And yeah, it's a mess. I feel bad for Lynn Shay and Olivia Cook, who are both in it, because like they're actually like in some pretty good stuff. Like Lynn Shay is you'll probably know best from the Insidious series. She's the
kind of the medium.
Yeah, the medium lady. And like she's the best part of those movies in my opinion. And and she has like some good acting chops. I think she's a great actress. But
anytime I see her though, I immediately think we're in an Insidious movie.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, like even in this movie though, she wasn't that good, because like you could tell that like she knew this movie sucked and like she did not want to be there.
So, Crowns and Screams. Let's just get it over with.
Okay, I'm gonna do a solid 2 on each of those because that movie sucked.
I'm gonna do a 2 on Crowns and a 1 on Screams.
Okay, that's fair.
All right, Origin of Evil, the much better Ouija movie. If you're gonna watch a Ouija movie, watch this one.
Yeah, don't even waste your time. Though I guess I will say that have a caveat on the original movie. If you're going to watch it with some friends. Make it an experience. I'll make fun of it. It's that kind of movie. It's the laugh at it, have a mystery science theater kind of party.
What's this? New prop for work.
Spirit, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ouija Origin of Evil. They, for some reason, decided to make another Ouija movie because apparently the first one made a lot of money, even though it sucked. And so they decided to actually, like, maybe throw a little bit of money at it, maybe get some people who actually, like, cared about horror movies and, like, making good ones involved. So they got Mike Flanagan, and who we discussed in our last episode as being pretty freaking awesome. They got his writing partner, Jeff Howard, who I failed to mention when we were talking about him last episode, but yeah, he was involved in basically all of Flanagan's projects. Mike Flanagan hired a lot of actors that he used in other stuff. I mean, you see like half the cast of Haunting of Hill House in this movie.
You really do,
and so that means the acting is good.
In our last episode, I mentioned Lulu Wilson. She plays kind of the child who gets haunted by the Ouija board. Well, not by the Ouija board, by the demon Marcus, who is the Ouija. I don't know. Anyway, I think this was one of... Sorry?
Well, I guess get into whether or not it's a demon or what it is. Yeah, the character's... Her character's name is Doris.
And I think this is one of the first things she did. At least it's one of the first things I remember seeing her in. And I think this little girl has a lot of potential for horror movies. I think she does a really, really great job. And Annalise Basso's in it, Elizabeth Reeser. There are some awesome stars in it who really add to the flavor of the movie. And I loved kind of the plot of the movie too, that Annalise Basso her character's Lena Zander. Her husband has just passed away. She's trying to get money for her family.
The older daughter.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. Alice Zander. Elizabeth Reeser.
Yes.
Apologize. I'm looking at my cast list and got my names goofed. And they have kind of this scam going where they bring people in and do seances and have all this cool technology. And, you know, it had this moral of sometimes believing in these things that we, you know, maybe deep down know are not true, help us get over things and really help us move past some stuff. And I really wanted them to kind of use that more throughout the movie.
Yeah, so yeah, they're doing these seances, but they're justifying basically deceiving these people because it helps these people, you know, get over the death of their loved one and help them move on.
I don't think the movie was perfect in any way. I thought once we see the demon, which is actually pretty early in the show, things just kind of start to snowball and get crazy, and the plot is thrown at you all at once, and there's now this priest whose wife died, and now he loves the mom, and it's just... it kind of goes from 30 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour real quick.
Yeah, so I guess the kind of filling in some of the blanks on the plot. So this mom and the two daughters, they come into contact with the Ouija board. At first, the mom picks it up because, like, oh, hey, this might be a cool prop for doing seances. But then the daughter, Doris, the younger daughter, she is able to communicate with her dead father through it. And so, suddenly, like, it's real, and they're putting all this value in it. And it even helps them, like, locate money hidden in their house when they're about to get evicted, you know, hidden in the walls from a previous tenant. But all the while, there's this priest who runs the Catholic school that the girls go to, who is, you know, increasingly concerned about absences due to working for their mom and all that kind of stuff. And so he keeps reaching out, but this, you know, demon basically uses the Ouija board to possess Doris, and she starts doing all sorts of evil stuff, and so the priest is trying to help the family, like, overcome this. But like you said, it goes from 0 to 90 in a couple of minutes. Like, suddenly, yeah, she's possessed, and then suddenly, like, the priest is there, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and there's this whole thing with, is she possessed by a demon, or I guess it's like an evil spirit, in this case a dude named Marcus who was
so
murdered.
Nefarious.
Yeah, well, and I guess he was murdered in the house by, like, some evil Nazi scientist, and I don't know, a lot starts getting thrown at you real quick, and I feel like it kind of starts falling apart. Like, there's some really good ideas still going on in terms of, you know, kind of horror plot. I feel like, some of the possession stuff was really genuinely creepy, but it starts falling apart because they have to make it tie into the original Ouija movie. So they start having to have like the mouth sewn shut thing, which allegedly is stopping.
Yeah, I don't get that. Why? I mean, that's very common in voodooism. I don't understand what the connection here is to Ouija boards.
Yeah, I guess they keep saying that, like, they have to sew her mouth shut or she'll be able to keep speaking the evil voices and stuff, but it doesn't really suffer from being possessed. I don't know. It gets really messy because they have to tie it into the ridiculous nonsense plot of the first movie, and everything just falls apart, and it's a shame, and I also felt like you could tell that they kind of ran out of money in terms of a lot of the effects. So there's like when Doris becomes possessed, you see like her bend her back backwards, and that's pretty creepy. And then suddenly, like you see this like ghost figure like climbing into her mouth, kind of thing, and you see it like from the ghost figure climbing into the mouth versus like what you would see if you're not seeing the ghost, and that just looked really like kind of bad CGI, like a mouth like in this like weird shape.
Granted, there were some scenes where the cinematography had some really good moments where it was like a close-up on one of the supporting cast, and then Lulu Wilson's character was in the background and she had like demon face on.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated those moments. I thought they were pretty haunting.
Yeah, well, I think that's like quality cinematography from Mike Flanagan, despite any... Because, I mean, like, you can get that shot even if you don't have a huge effects budget.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, I feel like a lot of the cinematography, the set looks great. The acting was pretty solid. It felt like it fit into the 70s, which is when it was set. But, yeah, like, the ghouls that are, these evil spirits or whatever, it was kind of vague on what exactly they were. It seemed to be that they were, like, spirits that were tortured and then they turned into these monsters almost. They looked real bad. Which is a shame because, like, they hired Doug Jones to play the ghoul version of Marcus, and Doug Jones is amazing.
Agreed.
He is the actor who was the fish guy in Shape of Water. He was Abe Sapien in Hellboy. He does basically like every like really cool physical creature performance that isn't done by Andy Serkis is done by Doug Jones. He's awesome.
He's the new Nosferatu in the movie that's in post-production.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
Just
excited.
thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, like he's amazing. But even like, I don't know, just the design of the creatures just didn't look good though. So I don't know, everything just kind of falls apart at the end because they have to make it connect. And I think that's really a shame because like it's leaps and bounds better than the first movie. But because it is connected to the first movie's taint gets all over
it. I like that. I'm going to use that. Okay, so crowns, screams?
I'm going to give it 4 screams because it wasn't really that scary. There's some pretty creepy moments, especially with Lulu Wilson, being a possessed little girl. Like some of those moments are pretty solid, but it wasn't like that terrifying at any given point. And then Crowns, I'm gonna give it a 5. It's an all right movie. Like it's leaps and bounds over the original, but I don't know. I'm probably not gonna watch it again.
I would give it a 5 on both. I think the best scare in the entire movie was when she was first possessed, Lulu's character, and she made the 2 bullies at school hit themselves in the face with the slingshot.
Yeah, that part was pretty great.
And again, that was off camera. You didn't see what was going on, but you knew what was happening. And that really got under my skin the first time I saw this movie, just because it was kids and violence and all that. But yeah, overall, it's a good... Invite some friends over, watch a scary show. There are a few jumps. It might terrify a few people. It might make a few people bored. Like, it's a solid movie. It's a good date night horror movie.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I guess to its credit, like it really relied on the jump scare very little, while the first movie was basically like just jump scares, which I mean shows just the difference of caliber there. Like it occasionally made you jump, but it was like genuinely like, hey, like the characters would have jumped away in fear from this thing too, not just like a quick cut to something creepy. So I thought that was good. My favorite scene, because I didn't mention that earlier, was actually just a part where Doris is talking to Lena's boyfriend or would-be boyfriend, the dude who keeps floating around trying to hit on her teenage sister. She's talking to him, and she just like talks about she just like describes very creepily to him what the experience is of suffocating and like what it does to your body. And it was very unnerving. I love that scene because you see this guy's reaction.
And Lulu does just such an awesome, creepy, matter-of-fact kind of a way.
Yeah. Gotta say, like, if you want a little girl to be possessed in a movie, she's your go-to. She was great at that in Annabelle creation, too.
Agreed.
So, yeah, she kicks trash. I really like pretty much the whole cast of this movie. But yeah, it ultimately kind of had to fall a little bit flat because it was just, connected to the first one, unfortunately.
All right. Well, do we need to say anything else?
No, I think if we say anything else, then the episode will be a gazillion hours long.
It's true. I could say a lot more things, but I won't.
Well, let's ask the Ouija board. This isn't convincing because I don't have a Ouija board in my house.
It's going Z-O. We need to pull the plug quick.
Goodbye.
Need even more Scream Kings? Here's our obligatory shameless social media plug. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Scream Kings Pod. You could also email us at screamkingspodcast@gmail.com. Help us reach a wider audience of horror fans by leaving a review on iTunes or by sharing a link on social media. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/ScreamKings. Stay spooky.